Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think is an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riff? Sometimes dissecting our favorite albums containing riffs, sometimes with people who write really great riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, are my friends in music, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. How are you guys?
Great.
I don't care. Anyway, we got someone who's a riff disciple in their own right. They have a record that came out last year. We talked a little bit about it in our best of 2023. Obsession Destruction. It is out now on Red Scroll. I am, of course, talking about Paul from Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean. Paul, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to talk about a record that means a lot to me today.
Yeah, and I love this record. And I want to ask, with it being maybe like a year last month, correct, with Obsession Destruction, how does it feel? Like, as I've heard you describe it as like your first like kind of proper full length. How do you feel like kind of like now a year removed from it? What's kind of the vibe?
Honestly, it feels like it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That we wrote it. Most of it was written over COVID. So it was like, it took a long time to write. It took a long time to come out after it was written. It took a long time to do all this stuff. So, I mean, I still really like it, obviously, but I'm always just looking forward to the next thing. Not to be like, I don't care about it. Great record. I just write once I have the vinyl in my hands, I'm like, this is a complete thing. It's done. And I'm ready to write again. So yeah, it feels like it was way longer ago than that. And I honestly feel like we've all gotten so much better since then that I'm like, I want people to know like the next thing that we're ready to do.
Did you already also have the Consumed by Vitriol stuff written, like at the same time as the full length, or did you write that after?
By the time the full length was out, we already had the EP before it and the EP after it. So we were originally going to do them in a different order, but it just didn't work with like release times and stuff. So because the vinyl was going to be delayed, we did the EP that came out before it. We recorded after it. So it was like, it was kind of weird, but we thought that the musical transition still made sense, which is why we did it that way. But yeah, so I believe by the time it came out, Consumed was mostly, if not 100% written.
You've also been doing some touring this year. I know you'd opened for Sumac earlier this year, but then you just kind of did maybe your first kind of West Coast run for the band. How was that? How did it go?
Yeah, it was awesome. I could not say enough good things about it. Looked up to Sumac for a long, long time. Just even getting asked to do that one-off in February I was like, this is awesome. You have to take this. And then we got kind of last minute asked to do the West Coast as a fill-in for the other band that wasn't going to be able to do it anymore. And it was like, I remember getting an email at work and seeing it and being like, this doesn't even make sense. Screenshotting it, sending it to the band and being like, guys, we have to figure out how to do this. But it was like less than 2 months notice. And I was like, we got to fly, we got to rent, we got to do all this shit. And I was like, I don't even, my expectations are low for our ability to do this. So I told everybody, figure it out like in a week, and it worked out. So I'm really grateful for it. They were so nice. All the shows were great. Literally not a single thing went wrong for us, which is remarkable. And people that go to their shows are just very respectful and open to music. So even though we played first and some shows were playing at 7:30 or 8, people showed up and people just were there to see music. So it was really awesome.
That's cool. I like that no difficulties on the tour. I think maybe I saw perhaps the East Coast where the van had broke down with a couple days left.
Yeah, and the van actually broke down on the early in the tour, like 4 days in. We had to pull over and get the water pump replaced, on the side of the highway. Let's get off. We have to go do this. So we did that, got to the same show that night, did the rest, did another week of shows. And then, the transmission went in rural Virginia. So, and that was 2 weeks prior to the Sumac West Coast. But
yeah,
truly, if we didn't have the Sumac to look forward to, I would have been like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Even still, the East Coast shows were awesome too. People were coming out every night, and we were mostly quote unquote headlining. But yeah, people were coming out every night just to see us, and that still blows my mind that we can play in a place we've never played, and 50 people will be like, I listened to you on Spotify and I want to come see you play.
You mentioned, being into Sumac for a long time, where when you were kind of maybe getting into some more extreme versions of music, where you listened to a lot of those Hydra Head bands growing up?
Yeah, 100%. I specifically remember the first time I was listening to Mastodon and Isis and Baroness, where I found this thread out of Slayer and Iron Maiden and and Metallica, those earlier kind of threshold bands. And I found Mastodon. I remember getting all their stuff and pirating it. And then people throwing in on forums oh, you should check out Torch and Kylesa and Baroness and all those other bands that are looped in that world. And that's ultimately how I found Isis. And then Isis takes you to Hydra Head, and Hydra takes you to Botch. And then it just, a whole world opens up. So yeah, it's me at 15 pirating Isis records is looking at 30-year-old me and being like, I guess you did something right somewhere, because it worked out great. And I was feeling that legitimately every day on the tour, in the littlest ways. Playing shows with them is one thing, and that's fantastic. But then it's tour is mostly just kind of sitting around. So it'd be man, I'm sitting here changing my strings at the same table as Aaron. And I know it's a nothing moment, but for me, I'm this is very affirming thing that's happening right now. So it was really cool.
Dylan, take your shirt off.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Dylan has a huge Mastodon back piece.
I do.
Yeah.
Do you have Leviathan?
I have the Crack the Sky album cover on my back.
I also have that on my arm. It's really hard to see. You have the whole thing on your back?
I have the whole thing. It's been about a decade in the work. I got it right as I moved into this area. So that was so the album came out in March of 2009. So I think I got it around tail end of 2009. And it's just been all right, let's just go through and redo it. So over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been revamping it. So now all that's left is the actual background shit that goes into it. So yeah.
Yeah, I got the Rasputin guy from the cover. That was my second or third tattoo. That record might be my favorite record of all time still.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of them that mean a lot to me, but for some reason that one just right then and there just hit at the right time.
Yeah, for me, that was the one that when I listened to all the way through, that unlocked all of these bands that I was just talking about. I was oh, I get it, because it kind of has that classic rock kind of, it bridges the gap between being too heavy for me to think that it's listenable and not.
Well, we are talking about another band from Georgia, another record from 2009. And I am curious, when we got connected and, it was I feel maybe there are two camps of people. You could either go, Red Album or Blue Record. When we kind of nailed at least that we were going to be talking about Baroness today, Paul, what was it that made you all right, we got to talk about Blue Record? Why that record in particular?
I remember you asked and I was man, I don't know which it is. And then I fully committed to Blue Record. And then the next day I went and listened to them both and I was oh, maybe I meant Red. but then I've been listening to them and watching old live videos and stuff over the past few weeks. And I'm like, I will start this with a very controversial, potentially opinion, which is that I really don't think it's a metal record. I've decided. I think it's straight up it's a rock record. I think they're both rock records. Isaac has a little bit more of like a metal tinge, but Isaac is like the hardest thing in these two records. And even still, it's not really. I think now they would tell you they're not a metal band, or maybe they would say metal like Sirius XM metal. But I think they've always wanted to be a rock band. I don't think they've ever been like, we want to be a sludge metal band or whatever. I think they've always wanted to be a rock band. I think this is the record that transitions to them in that world more than all the other ones. And I guess to really answer your question, it just feels so good. It's a feeling good record. It's the summer to Red's fall or Red's winter to me, or maybe it's the spring to whatever, but like it's the uplifting Red, in my opinion, I think.
There are like so many points on this album. This album loves a very epic sounding kind of angelic chord progression. And I love that, you said rock record. I had like done zero research before we decided on this album. I just only listened to it before. And when, John Baizley had mentioned that one of his favorite records while like he was writing the album to listen to was Queen's A Day at the Races. And now I can't unhear like those kind of Queen just songwriting tropes with some of the guitar harmonies and stuff like that. I feel like it's all over this.
I read that, but didn't go back and listen to it.
Me neither.
Do you really see it?
I feel like I've listened to enough Queen to like get the vibe, but
yeah,
I've yet to do like a side by side comparison. But the moment I heard Queen, I was like, okay, this makes sense. But Dylan's always like, every time we talk about this band, he's kind of compared it to classic rock, maybe more specifically some southern rock stuff.
I see it like I see the 1-to-1 with like Thin Lizzy, or any of the like guitar harmony centric bands.
I've always brought up the Allman Brothers when it came to these first two records or the first two Relapse releases.
A lot of the guitar work, and I know we'll talk about it, but a lot of the songs are like, we're going to do a thing for a little bit, and then we have a whole passage where we're just going to play, where everybody plays and they're doing harmonies and they're playing over each other and they're trading back and forth. And it's so much of that Southern rock influence that I think is just ingrained in them without realizing that it is, that they just do it and it feels supernatural.
It's so good. We mentioned, these are some Relapse releases, and I'd always like kind of wondered how like a band just kind of got connected with that label like right out of the gate. But it seemed like forming in Georgia in 2003, I know like the members had like grown up within like a mile or so away from each other in Virginia. It seemed like some of them were in that band, like a punk metal band called Johnny Welfare and the Paychecks. But the original lineup consisted of John Baizley, Tim Luce, Summer Welch, and Alan Blickel. They did a demo in 2004. They had a first EP and a second EP in 2004 and 2005 that were released through Hyper Realist Records. And then maybe they get connected with this like kind of three-way split they did, where it featured High on Fire, Coliseum, and then Baroness. So I didn't know like how it, how the label kind of approached them, but I would assume just by looking at, the stats that maybe that's how they got approached. And maybe they were just playing shows with High on Fire and Coliseum too, and they asked them to be on it. I don't know. Does anybody know?
I think when Dylan and I did that High on Fire episode, the tour for Death Is This Communion, one of the legs of it was Coliseum and Baroness and High on Fire. I guess that would have been before the Blue Record came out, right?
Yeah, correct. Yep. You also have to think about it too, like being from Georgia, Relapse signs Mastodon in like 2000. So you've got their two biggest releases at that point, Remission and Leviathan, kind of setting the world on fire through that type of music, that subgenre of even sludge and doom, whatever you want to call it. Relapse sees that, hey, we have this great band that we signed initially from kind of the Atlanta area. Baroness is from Savannah. they're kind of mutually associated that way. I'm sure shows were played in different, iterations of the bands. And I'm sure there was a little bit of influence there from the four guys from Atlanta, Georgia, to get to at least maybe usher in Baroness getting signed to Relapse with that.
I mean, I just always wonder, like, I think we're speculating in a way that I email labels and they don't respond to me. So I'm like, I have to assume that it would be like, yeah, Mastodon or High on Fire or Torch or any of the bands that are doing the label thing at that time are like all know each other. But this was also kind of a different world for labels, I think. Like we were doing like the Scion tour and like there were sponsor stuff and South by Southwest was bigger. I mean, they played Coachella, I think, in like '07. I think they played Bonnaroo the same year or maybe the year before. So like, I don't know how it was happening, but they had enough appeal that they were getting thrown on things that more money was going at. Not that the money matters, but like that their name was getting out there more than it would now.
There's a lot of different kind of limbs that it could kind of go from to, attribute to this band ending up on a pretty known label at that point and pretty known label even by today's standards, right?
Obviously, we're talking about Blue Record today, but, we've kind of mentioned Red Album as well. They're kind of considered sister records. I feel like personally, I maybe fall into the camp of the, Red Album, just maybe because it's the first one I heard. Maybe it sounds a little bit more raw to me. I don't know how you guys feel how these albums kind of compare to one another. I mean, this definitely feels more, I don't know if I want to say like maybe more focused in a way. Maybe they just kind of figured out what they wanted to do, but I don't know. How do you guys feel about maybe the differences or how these albums kind of compare with one another?
I feel like for me, they're just like different times a year or different moods. I could take either of them. I don't really think either of these are particularly better than one another. When I think of them in my head, and I could be wrong if I listen to them, Blue is like a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more major, a little bit more guitar lead driven. And Red is like more sullen, a little bit softer, a little bit like rounder. I could be totally wrong. That's just how I remember them in my head. But so I think they're both like, I could put either of them on and not be mad.
With the being, even before reading the statement, they're sister records. Like you could always compare those two records kind of neck and neck, right? It kind of seems like it almost comes from the same writing session to an extent. But no, Paul's right. This one's a little bit more guitar lead driven, right? There's a few more harmonies on it. There's a few more lead breaks to it. And I think that's what stuck out to me the most was I did grow up listening to a lot of Southern rock bands, and I was into Mastodon early on and still am, but hearing those guitar harmonies, made me go back to the first time I heard like Naked Burn on Leviathan or like Hearts Alive and hearing all those lush harmonies on there, and then hearing this record and going, okay, this makes a little more sense to me than maybe the Red Album did, because I kind of shrugged off the Red Album the first time I heard it as like, oh, okay, it's another band from Georgia. Sounds very reminiscent of what I've heard before. Sounds fine. Nothing too wild for me. But then the Blue Record, I heard it, and I think there was a video for Jake's Leg. There's a video for Horse Called Golgotha. I'm sorry. And I saw the video and went, okay, I have to pick this up. And I've referenced this before, but in kind of the certain portions of the Southern US, there was a retail chain called Hastings Music. And I think they had some sort of deal with Relapse Records. So like all of the Relapse Records releases were always on the front shelf when you'd walk in, and there were always magazine adverts. So if it had Relapse on it, I'd buy it. It was $7 or whatever first week. I'd buy it. I'd pick it up. And I either learned to like it or I flipped it. And most of the Relapse stuff I loved a lot. And this record's no different. And the fact that blue is my favorite color. So it just like hit on a very like internal level with that.
I prefer the Red Album, I think, but I don't really know why. I don't have like a reason. I think it's just like the record that I have listened to more.
Sure. The recording process for this, like, kind of interested me too, where they basically, I think John was quoted with saying that they might have like 85% of the record done, and then they would like go into the studio and, leave the rest of it maybe to a little bit more experimentation. And, Paul, I don't know if any of Dylan has recorded, Swindle's recorded. How much of like your own project, Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean, like, do you have everything kind of fleshed out before you go into the studio, or do you maybe like leave a little bit more open to like spontaneity when you are kind of laying down the tracks for a record?
All the songs like need to be done. Like I need to know like this is how many times you do this part, and like they're complete. I basically want to be able to play them live before I would consider recording them. But even still, like stuff does happen. I'm not opposed to any sort of change, or like there's always parts that get chopped up or changed or lengthened, or like we add stuff over. So I don't think it would be possible not to. But I watched an interview about their recording process where I know what you're talking, excuse me, with the 85% thing. And he was like, we want to like, sometimes we'll write a song and play it live, and then we'll play it live a few times and we'll be like, this part didn't work, and we'll go back and change it. And like, I think that's like an important part of being able to record and not just like sticking to something that doesn't work.
Definitely. Another thing I think that was noted in the writing and recording process for this album as well is that they mentioned that they overwrote for it as well. Like we kind of talked about this several times with like Bruce Springsteen, where you go into the studio and you have like a ton of songs, and maybe it just kind of dwindles down to the 12 songs that made the record. Has that ever happened to you as well? Maybe you come in with like 20 songs. Now you're just like, all right, we only have so much time. We got to get it done.
No, I just like, I don't know how most bands do it, I guess, but like we always will just cut shit before it gets too far. Like if we've been working on a thing for like a week and we're like, this is not going anywhere, it gets erased off the whiteboard and I just move on and I never think about it again. I think for me, that's better. I'd rather like we go in to do 8 songs, we do them, we've practiced them for a few months, and that's what we go to do. For some bands, obviously that doesn't work, or they want to write more, but like, I'd rather just focus on the things that I know work. And as soon as someone is like, this isn't working, I'm just like, let's move on. Let's scrap this. I want everyone to be stoked on everything we do.
Yeah. And that like, even that alone, that idea of just like, if it's not working, then we'll move on. It seems like that was certainly a focus on this record where, obviously there is like a flow, there's like a natural kind of forward moving progression to this album. And so that was like, if it doesn't do that, if there is like not just one clear kind of path, then it's not gonna happen. And so I definitely really appreciate that about this album.
This album does move. It keeps going. There's not a lot of time that it slows down. There's no halting.
I will say I do think there's some fat on this record.
Okay. Yeah,
I can't wait to get into that.
Yeah.
I do think there's some fat on this record.
I could maybe make some assumptions where you might be pointing to. Real quick, before we get there, let's just kind of name off some of the lineup on this album. We mentioned John Baizley, vocals, guitars. There's a little piano work on this album. Obviously, the lyricist and the album artwork creator, as he has done through the band's entire existence. Peter Adams. This is the first album to feature Peter, guitars, and vocals. I think Peter was initially supposed to be in Baroness from the beginning, but life happens that doesn't quite work out. He replaces Brian Blickel, who is Alan's brother, and also appeared on Red Album, and I think one of the splits that they ended up doing. But John mentioned that like this was a person that was basically there from when they were growing up, and they were getting into some like alternative and maybe more extreme versions of music, Jesus Lizard, Dinosaur Jr., Fugazi, stuff like that. So it kind of worked out that finally culminating in that. I
watched an interview where they were talking about how he was supposed to, like you said, he was supposed to be in the band originally, and he's not. But they grew up listening to punk records together, to Metallica together, to playing guitar together, and then Pete goes to the Iraq War, and then he comes back and joins Baroness.
That's
Damn.
it.
Wow.
Yep. He was in the Air Force or something.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Dylan, I didn't know this either. He's in another project as well.
Yeah, another band called Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're cool records. I probably haven't spent near as much time with them as I have like these records or this band's out, but they're fun records. They really are. It's just like, again, very, very, a little bit more straightforward than this band.
You can see the Pete and Valkyrie and the Pete and Baroness, and then you can see when Pete leaves Baroness.
Absolutely.
Because his like guitar harmony, lead, all that like stuff is so strong in Valkyrie. They're more of like to me, they're basically a straight up classic rock band with like way more leads than you'd ever need. And it rocks. Some of their songs are it's just guitar lead, not great singing, and guitar lead. And I'm like, this is perfect.
It's, but no, you're right. You absolutely can tell. And, you know, I think that's why, and I enjoy everything that this band has put out, that being Baroness, but I do hearken back to, you know, this era. Green and Yellow even is kind of pushing it for me a little bit when it comes to just the sheer amount of music that there is. You know, kind of, I'm kind of hesitant on double albums at all, because it's like, come on, guys, like give me an hour at the most is fine. But even that's like, you know, especially if it's a double record, it's like, all right, let's edit ourselves a little bit, but it's fine because it's a great record. But I still come back to these first two, and a lot of it has to do with Pete's playing, because I feel like it's more representative on this record in particular than anything, because it is so strong. It is felt so much throughout this, and it feels like, and Gina does a fantastic job with her playing. She's a fantastic player, great player, but I feel like John's kind of toxic twin at this point was Pete. And it was kind of set in motion to be Pete the entire time. And it was just like, hey, we're just going to hold this spot for you for a little while.
Summer Welch, this is the last album with the bass player. And then, of course, Alan Blickel, who is all over this fucking record. I think his last record is Yellow and Green as well, maybe?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he left after the bus crash, I think.
Oh,
I think I think that's true.
Production-wise, we see a little bit of a changing of hands. So, you know, I mentioned you have Philip of Kylesa kind of doing the production through most of the band's career. And then I think with this record, maybe they felt like they were comfortable and they wanted someone who would kind of like maybe get them out of their shells a little bit. So they approached John Congleton to helm the production of this record, who is a Grammy Award-winning producer. He's a member of the alt-rock band The Paper Chase. I have not listened to them, but he also worked on Yellow and Green in 2012. He provided some music for Jackass, some shows on the Discovery Channel, Friday Night Lights. But I guess the reason they reached out to John was his work on the Black Mountain record In the Future from 2008. And it was like a CD they listened to all the time on, you know, tour, on the playlist. And then after some further research, it also turned out that John had worked with Explosions in the Sky, which Baizley had mentioned that maybe wasn't a band that he was very much into, but he loved the production of the record. So it was like, all right, let's get this guy something different. So a little bit of a change of pace, maybe.
Yeah, I think you can hear that. I think you can hear that all over it. Like it's a little bit more soundscapey and a little bit like cleaner and crisper in a lot of ways.
Alan Duchess did the mastering. I don't know if, you know, Dylan, you've mentioned him. He's
got a laundry list. We don't even need to go there. He's done any and everything.
Look it up. You'll be looking at it for at least a half hour.
He's got a great, I can't remember if it's his studio name or if it's his personal like IG page, but he goes through like a lot of production things he's done and like digs into why. Like he did one on Jane Doe in particular where he talks about how loud they wanted that record. He's like, got it. I can do it. And like he's gone through some really cool stuff. So like check his IG page out for sure.
All right, let's get into the beginning of the record, shall we? We begin with the instrumental intro, Bullhead Psalm, which is not a Melvins reference, rather just a reference to the catfish of the area, I'm sure. But thoughts on the intro?
How you catch those things, right?
How do you catch them?
Man, you got to go out there and you just got to bury your fist in whatever hole in the river you can, and it's going to latch on, and you just got to know. You got to pull it out before it pulls you in.
I bet there's literally a video of Pete saying that at some point.
Don't be afraid. You just got to do it.
You know, he had like a fishing show at one point.
You're shitting me.
That makes complete sense.
No, I had no idea.
I don't know that it was like his full show, but like I know he was part of a fishing television show at one point.
That's awesome. I really need to find this and hopefully include it in this episode.
I'm not really an intro song guy. I want the record to take off. However, I think it works here. I'm okay with it. I see it more as like what could have just been the first minute of Sweetest Curse. So if I think about it that way, it's fine. And anytime like this song comes on shuffle or whatever, this song comes on and I'm like, I want to listen to the whole record now because it sets the scene so well.
Sets the theme, the motif of what continues to play throughout the record. Because as we're going to get into this, like that motif keeps coming back at different points in the record, which just ties it all together. It's so amazing.
I kind of wish they had done what they did on the Red album and made it like the Red album for like the first minute and a half is just swelling up to the first riff, but it's part of Raise on Pinion. It's part of the song. I wish they had just like added it to the Sweetest Curse. But I do like the end of this song, how it just like kind of drones on that last note that leads into the first note of the Sweetest Curse.
Lots of transitional kind of like feeding into one another, just like kind of tying it all together, as we mentioned, like that forward movement. Lots of weird effects on this fucking song. I genuinely thought there's that like Earthquaker pedal, like Rainbow or Maker or whatever, that has like all of the like Willy Wonka sounding kind of weird effects. But there are also, there's a lot of like variations with like fuzz throughout this record too, like, just kind of levels of distortion. I thought like it almost sounded like a distorted church organ at one point on this song.
Yeah.
But it really just kind of feeds into the next song, the Sweetest Curse. So this song in particular, I think we just kind of get into a classic Baroness groove of like the almost like off-kiltered rhythmic chugging, and then also just ending with a weird kind of scale run before, it's just kind of definitely a thing that this band does very well. Thoughts on the Sweetest Curse?
I think it's a great opening track for sure. Like I would hope that it would. That's why I was, I agree with you, Paul. I do believe that the intro should have been added on to this and just kind of segued into this track because it feeds into it so well. And that opening riff, while the first track may not be a reference to the Melvins, the opening riff just makes me think of something off of like Houdini or Stag or like Stoner Witch or one of the major label albums that they did. I think the opening riff is great. I think it's a classic riff. Anytime I hear it, I'm sucked right into it.
I'm really bad at like remembering exactly what the riffs are based on like just reading what I wrote, but I do know this one. I wrote something like this. Everything about the song is what makes me want to play guitar. It's got the chuggy riff at the way it starts is perfect. Like the record could have started with this song. It could have just been, the low chug riff. And then all the leads that like meander around all over this song are so cool. Like they're very legitimately, everything about the song is what guitar music should be.
I mean, to that point, a question that we often ask people on the show is like, what to you makes a riff? What should a riff have? Is this kind of like in that vein? Is this everything? Or like what, as a listener or as a musician, when you're coming up with a riff, like what do you think it needs to have?
It's a good question. And like, I'm like looking at what I wrote about this song, and I specifically wrote like, could I play this? No, probably not. but like that, I don't know. Like I understand what you're asking. I think that it's like an intangible feeling that I have. about riffs and like leads and music. And all the leads in this song, really most of them on this record, have this intangible, like, I just feel someone playing it, and like I feel it in my chest. I feel like when I hear the like slide ups in this song, like I want to like pick up a guitar and do like that sliding into that first note of the harmony, because that's what feels so good about like playing guitar and like being able to like write a thing that has never been written before. And all the leads in this are like, they clearly loved early Metallica and like probably listened to a lot of Iron Maiden and Thin Lizzy, and then like morphed them into this like Southern, almost sludge, maybe metal bastardized version of it, where it's like they're playing off each other so well. And I can just feel that. Like I feel that they got together and were like, we're gonna write some kick-ass stuff, and I just can, you never know, you could just tell. Like music for me is just very I feel like sometimes it's very hard to express, and this is one of those moments. And leads are hard to explain why they sound good, because they're not riffs. Riffs are easy, like Crowbar is easy to explain why you like it, and it's because it sounds sick.
Yeah.
Leads aren't always that way, but they are on this one.
The riff is an indescribable thing sometimes. It's you can hear one and go, okay, that's obviously a great riff. And sometimes you can hear one and it's like, it doesn't hit the way you want it to, and there's no way to describe why it does or doesn't. But yeah, as you said, like you can find a band and go like, yeah, this band is fucking great. This band writes riffs, and that's all I need to say. Like they just know how to write a riff. It's just the thing that they know how to do.
To me, listening to the song, it seems very obvious that they wrote the entire song based off the first riff, but they never come back to the first riff. Like once they move on from that first part of the song, you don't fucking hear it ever again.
One other thing I noted for the song as well, I mean, it's all over the record. The sound of the drums are just so fucking big and weighty. Like it is just pounding. And I mean, he really like is able to stretch a lot of his chops throughout the whole record. I love that you mentioned Thin Lizzy. I feel like there's a lot of like Celtic style rhythms for sure that are reminiscent of that. And then we kind of end the song with this like, very Appalachian style of like finger picking, which, brings us into Jake Leg, which I did have to look up. I didn't know like, all right, what the hell is Jake Leg? But Jamaican ginger was a patent medicine with high alcohol content during Prohibition that went by the slang Jake. And so during the 1930s, several people became afflicted with hand and feet paralysis due to an unknown neurotoxin added to the mix. So they would just be like, oh, he's got like a Jake Leg when you're walking. Yeah, he got Jake Leg. How do y'all feel about this song?
I love when Baroness does an instrumental passage and then they just yell the name of the song as the first words, like Isaac.
Oh, I guess I didn't even realize that is like a formula that they use. But if it works, then I guess I'm not really bothered by it. I think it's this song is so cool because they start together after the transition out of the previous song, but then there's just like the guitar solo. That's just like the fuzz turned all the way up on the smallest amp in the world, and it sounds like a million miles wide.
It's that fuzz sound, as we all know, comes back on the record a couple times too. I remember, and you've probably seen it, and I think all of us have probably seen it, but I remember watching Fantano's review of the record, and when it came out, and his only gripe on the record was this fuzz sound.
He doesn't like that. His opinion isn't valid.
Yeah, I was like, exactly. I was like, this fuzz sounds awesome. Like, it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to address that because I'll say something bad. That is like unbeatable lead tone for this type of music. It doesn't work everywhere, but I think that it's like so creamy and comes over everything that it is just not, to not like that is crazy.
Some people like cucumbers better pickled.
I do like this band does a really good job of, guitar harmonies, as we mentioned, but this song in particular, I noted them like they, crazy, right? It's almost like they're they're playing in unison, but they aren't. Like when you like really listen to it, it's like, oh, this guy's playing almost like something completely different than this, but it's like just within the same timing. But the dynamics on this song are incredible. Just where you're able to like hone in on like one instrument and then just like punch in on a dime, like fantastic.
This is also the first song where I really start to notice the drums. And he has a beat that's like, it's a double snare hit. And it's very not metal. And this is the song where I first realized that the record's drums are not really particularly metal. There's a ton of dance beats. There's a ton of, there's like ones that are like double time, like the beginning of Everlong. And then there's ones that are like hi-hat bass snare. So like, there's a bunch of that. Beats? Yeah. Disco beats. And then in this song, there's like, one of the main beats like right. And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense, but it sounds really good. It works really well in this band.
Yeah, there's disco beats all over this fucking album, everywhere. There's like 3 or 4 fucking songs with disco beats in them.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what takes this more out of the metal world into like the rock spectrum. Like they're not doing the double bass stuff. They're not blasting. A lot of the beats are like more refined or traditional or something. I don't know what word I would use.
Kind of more like soundscapey stuff with some of the noise at the end of this track. And then we get into the acoustic ballad, I guess, Steel That Sleeps the Eye. I like this song. I like it a lot. I feel like some of the noise almost gave me like a, maybe to tie it in with the album cover, a little bit of an underwater feel to it as well. Great. A little bit of piano. I mentioned John plays a little piano on this song as well, but really, really good track that kind of starts in that acoustic, area and then slowly builds in intensity and to, as it exits. But
the vocal harmonies on this track alone are enough to like fall in love with it. This might be one of my favorite tracks on the record. It may very well be my favorite track on the record. Because it's almost used like like some of the instrumental tracks on the album are used as like a segue into the next maybe louder track. But it does feel like it feels a little bit more rooted in maybe that bluegrass kind of feel, the Southern, bluegrass and country music and maybe some of the folk stuff. And it's such a cool song. And hearing the line that always comes to mind is the line about the bastards. That's the line that immediately sticks out to me. And then it segues into Swollen and Halo just so fucking perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of mentioned earlier with, Bullhead and the Sweetest Curse, where it's kind of like, it feels like it should be one thing. I feel like Steel That Sleeps the Eye and Swollen and Halo should also just kind of be maybe viewed as one big kind of track just because of the, it's in the same key or it's, using the same kind of theme. I mean, it literally mentions lyrically Steel That Sleeps the Eye in Swollen and Halo as well. But yeah, they just kind of work very well together, in my opinion.
Yeah, and in Steel That Sleeps the Eye, like the second, like there's like a vocal round that's going with the harmony, and the second person is just repeating Swollen and Halo. And
I never caught that.
Maybe I made it up, honestly, but that's what I hear the second person saying. I could be making it up, but I'm like 99% sure that's true. And then, like you said, like I actually noted the same thing that you did, where the guitar noises and like the delays and the like kind of warping stuff at the end, it does feel like waves like crashing and like we're about to go into a thing. And I think the song is like so out of left field, but it fits perfectly where it is. I think it splits the record really well. This is the first song where I note the lyrics and I go, I have no idea what this guy is talking about.
Yeah.
I know the words, like I can read the words. I know what they mean. I'm a lyrics guy too. Like I think lyrics are really, really important. I know them all to this whole record. I could sing them, but I don't know what the fuck we're talking about. And one fun little note about this song is this is the song they end up pulling their label that they end up putting their own records out on from, is Abraxan Hymns.
That's right. It's like a symbol or like deity for like good and evil, duality. Yeah, pretty. I think they started using that label for Purple. I could be wrong, but
that sounds right.
Great little tidbit there. I yeah, definitely hadn't caught that. I had to like, same thing with the lyrics, and they've kind of, remained pretty like close-lipped about a lot of like the meaning behind this record and a lot of their stuff. So there's definitely obviously a lot of Southern imagery and connections to maybe even like the Civil War and such. But yeah, reading through a lot of this stuff, couldn't tell you what the fuck anything means or what it's about.
It works so well together. It is such a complete package, like the lyrics through the whole thing. And I'm still like, it's just a vibe, and I just got to accept that it's not for me. Like I don't have the like knowledge base to understand like the whatever the complexities of this stuff is, and that's okay.
But Swollen and Halo, I mean, what a fucking wild psychedelic ride that is. Yeah. Oh man, that bass groove is, yeah, it's cooking. There's like that also vibrato kind of effect that they use that also kind of gives me more of that like weird underwater vibe a little bit. But I think the beginning of this song might be like one of the more like one of the catchiest parts of the record to me. Love a good melody.
My first note is every song the guitar is like, what the fuck? Because I'm like, I could never write this stuff. Like I just don't have that's not where my like guitar brain goes. And I think it's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, truly, we can make all of the connections to like where this came from or like how we ended up here. But like, yeah, the way that the hands work when he picks up a guitar, it's like, yeah, I'm certainly in the caveman realm when it comes to writing riffs. And this dude's just like, how many harmonies can we add into this shit? Like, how many changes and transitions are like, and that's so sick.
With the production on this album, and this track in particular is such a good representation of that production, because you can hear every single instrument on the album. Like you can hear left guitar, right guitar. Obviously you have multiple layered harmonies throughout that are just dubbed in and different tracks, but you can hear the bass and feel it pretty well. It's not just a loud instrument. It's obviously, you get the fundamental of it as well. The drums are really loud and present on this record, but the opening of this track, that groove, is such a great representation of hearing everything. Because I've always felt Baroness was a very vocal driven band, for sure, because John has such a very recognizable voice, even in this era where he's doing far more screaming and yelling into the mic. And the guitar harmonies were a big part of it, but I've always thought of Baroness as a very vocal driven band because he's got a great, interesting sounding singing voice when it comes to those big hooky choruses.
The bass on this song, the beginning and the end specifically, is nasty, like very distorted, very nasty sounding bass. Also, it's wild to me that you said you've always thought it's vocally driven. I literally wrote like, I don't know what any of the like lyrics are on either of Red or Blue. Like these could essentially be instrumental albums. Like his voice is just another instrument to me on these albums.
I like too that there's like maybe at around like where the bridge kicks in, it's just kind of like, it's just a jam, kind of feels like just a jam until the end of the fucking song. That's it.
I wrote, so the last 3 minutes of this song is just a jam.
Yeah.
it's just trading, descending guitar runs. There's a fuzz solo. There's a really cool open hi-hat beat going, and they just do that. And I think that's what when I mentioned this earlier, it's like, in some interview, John and Pete are like, we grew up around like people who like the Grateful Dead and like folk country and bluegrass, and it was just never really our thing. We want to make our parents mad, whatever. And I'm like, that might be true, but you internalized everything you ever heard, because this is a moment where it's like you guys just like playing together, and it's like it's what is a 6.5 minute song. The last 3 minutes of it are a jam. It's sick. But it's like I feel like they let themselves do what they actually like wanted to do rather than overthinking and being like, we have to walk away from that kind of playing.
That it's interesting you said that. I also saw kind of a quote as far as even like maybe the more Southern rock country influences on this. It was like John's like, I'm trying to like get away from that as well, which is like obviously, you know, you live around it your whole life, and you know, we have tons of like finger-picked like kind of just bluegrassy sounding stuff. So yeah, whether internalized or what, yeah, you just kind of like lean into it at a certain point. It's just naturally what's coming out of you. And kind of another little tie to the South as well. Ogeechee Hymnal, which the Ogeechee River is a blackwater stream and one of Georgia's few remaining free-flowing rivers, I guess. So epic guitar kind of instrumental. This is where I also noted maybe some more of that Queen inspiration with some of the writing as well. But yeah, I don't know. I like some of these kind of like I don't know if you call it like a passage or whatever, just to kind of break up the record a little bit. But it still feels like it's still going somewhere to me.
So I see the vision on the record. I do. I really do. But this is the first time where I'm like, we just did a 3-minute jam out of the previous song.
Yeah.
We can just play the next actual song. But like our record is an hour, like Jane's record is an hour long, and there's plenty of fucking around. So like, I'm not one to shit on the vision. I'm 100% with them. Whatever they want to do, they should do. But as a listener, I'm like, we can skip this one and go to where's called Golgotha.
I feel that.
The only thing I would keep is there are swells at the end, like they do in Rays. You could just put those at the beginning of Horse and skip the song.
You know, another kind of influence that I caught, and can't really unhear it, but there was the you mentioned also outside of Queen, Neil Young's kind of score for the movie Dead Man, which is all just kind of like weird ambient kind of electric guitar music with swells and stuff like that. So that like I didn't hear it a ton on the record, but I definitely heard it here with some of the effects that were going on for sure. But I guess I don't know if this is the only single on the record, A Horse Called Golgotha. I mean, I know it has the video. I know it was like released as a single before the record, but I would have to assume this is maybe the only single.
I think it is.
Yeah. Disco beat. They got a disco beat in this song for sure.
Definitely. 1,000%.
But hey, man, let's talk about those opening chord or those opening harmony chords that are going on there.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, that's the minute I heard those, I was hook, line, and sinker. I was done. And then going straight from that into that crazy like lead guitar harmony that's there, that's got the affected guitar in the background. I mean, what a crazy groove on this thing. The dance beat, as you said, just a wild fucking song to be a single at that.
Yeah, not many bands are going to be on Relapse are going to be able to pull off the dance beat being the first drum thing that you hear after these like chords with like that modified extra note on top of it to like be heavy enough to work it. But yeah, it's great. The video probably didn't need to happen. It's nothing to me, but like the song is great.
The only thing that I like the solo, there's like a couple different instances. There's like maybe the second solo, if you could consider it that, where it's like, I was listening to it with headphones on and it's like so loud in the mix where I was like, okay, well, maybe we could have scaled this one part back just a little bit. I love the way they play with the different distorted and like fuzz effects on this, but there was one part where I was like, God damn, that's like so fucking louder than like everything else that it was. It's like almost solo, a little, it was a little distracting for me, but I like the way it sounds. I think it just needs to be like maybe brought back down just a little bit, but maybe I could just go fuck myself, Baroness.
I don't remember that at all.
What's that?
I don't remember that at all.
And again, maybe I just like had it too loud in my headphones or something. But when I was like re-listening to it before we recorded, I was like, man, this one section of the song, it's just like, it was like so particularly loud. I'm like,
it cuts a little bit.
Yeah, maybe it's just like the fuzz pedal that he's using or something.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, I mean, that's like a very small like gripe, if you could call it that, with it. But
the ending of this track, the way it ends with like the different feel to it, and they're playing it faster, it's like, that's total Randy Rhoads shit to me. Like, I heard that, was like, that's that Randy Rhoads rhythm.
Yeah.
Like, just opens up really well, and it ends really like just intensely to me.
They just double time the beat, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they're considered verses technically, but during the like part that repeats a couple times, you can like hear, I don't know if they have an extra guitar track, but you can like clearly hear the strings being strummed like over and over again. And I fucking love, as a person that loves just noise being added to songs, I fucking love that.
Next track.
Or Hell and Hyde.
Kind of some acoustic finger picking on this track before it just explodes into another wall of sound. But then we also get that, again, just another kind of dancey disco beat on this track as well. Yeah, they do it well. I mean, it is that like dancey feel, but it's like certainly got a lot of like oomph to it too. You know, it punches you.
The bass really carries the song.
And
this is the one that he's just kind of doing spoken word stuff, like super low in the mix, right?
Yeah, it's got like a filter over it or something like that. I was like, when I was like re-listening to it, I'm like, is this like a sample at first? And then I was like, oh, okay, no, he's just
no, definitely John's voice for sure.
So, Paul, you mentioned earlier as we getting into this that there was some fat on the record. Is this one of those tracks?
This is the track. This is the track that I somehow wrote the most about this song, which is crazy because I really like the record, but maybe I just like talking shit more than I like music.
You're in with the right crowd right now.
The right first thing I wrote was, if there's one song can go, it's probably this. I hate to like say that because like the record came out 15 years ago, and I'm sure they have their own opinions on it. But like, if we're going to talk about the record, I just talk about the record, and I think this song can go. There's plenty of awesome guitar stuff, but they've already done that on the other 10 songs. Like, there's nothing so perfect about this one to me that if you cut it, I don't think anybody would notice. I think someone mentioned earlier about the voice being like another instrument. I think on this song in particular, the guitar is like vocals. And I think Pete said that he likes it. There's some interview where Pete said that he likes making the guitar be a voice in the band. And this is the song where the guitar is a voice. And I think if you listen to this song with that intention and then go back and listen to other songs on this record, you'll see those long jam passages not in the same way. It like almost, well, something will click for me. So in that way, I guess it's not skippable because I feel like it actually turns something on for me where I'm like, those jam sections have a lead that is actually telling a story in the way that the vocals are not doing in that part. So, but I don't know. I'm out on the song.
Yeah, it's when you get to the backside, I will say after Horse Called Golgotha, there's kind of a lull for me as well. And then it kicks into like the gnashing and stuff like that once you get into those.
I would even, and again, I like a lot of this stuff. I felt like Black Powder Orchard as like an instrumental. I don't know if it I don't remember it really. It felt like it just kind of comes in and goes, you know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily fade into the next track. It just kind of is there. It's like, again, some really cool, like country style finger picking with some like pretty wild leads over it.
That's my favorite part of that, are those weird harmonized, like there's a lot of them right at one time.
Sure.
It's like you hear every single distorted and fuzz track right there that they're using every sound. That's the memorable thing in that for me, is that beginning 10 or 15 seconds of that.
Yeah, because it's quick. It's not like, you know, the intro or anything like that. It really just kind of comes in and then we're kind of gone. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that kind of instrumental passage as compared to maybe the others on the record, or do you care about it at all? Like anything?
We've talked about like trimming fat from the record and everything. We actually missed a track.
I was going to say, I think
we did we? We did.
We missed a track.
Oh shit. Damn it. Yeah, we did miss a track. War, Wisdom, and Rhyme, which is the only song that I think I was able to, again, make some connections to the South. Obviously, I don't. I think it's a Civil War song. Peach and the Rattlesnake. We Were Wrong, Catfish, and the Bayonet. Those, all that imagery certainly sticks out. But again, like,
sounds like a Saturday night growing up for me.
I'm skipping Hell and Hyde, War, Wisdom, and Rhyme. We go Golgotha to Black Powder Orchard.
Okay.
I think that War, Wisdom, and Rhyme has the riffs, but they are not as good as any of the riffs in the other heavy songs on this record.
Right.
War, Wisdom, and Rhyme is the only song that I don't have like any interesting notes on. I'm just like, this is kind of where we're on the B side of the record. We've got to make it count, or we've got to just let it go.
Yeah.
And this, for me, you skip these two, and the record is still like 35 minutes. So it's not like we're pushing a crazy runtime or whatever. The riffs that they do in War, Wisdom, and Rhyme, they do better elsewhere.
It's really wild too, because I don't know if the sequencing was different for the record. Maybe these tracks would stick out a little bit more. Maybe they wouldn't. Coming right after A Horse Called Golgotha, which could have been like kind of like a crescendo, right? And then you've got to have a little bit of a lull. And, you kick right into the last couple tracks of the record, which are The Gnashing is a perfect track. But then it's like, you have a bit of a lull. There's a bit of a downer. Like you had this great peak with the end of Golgotha. And then it's just, okay, these are great tracks, but they're kind of the passable tracks on the record.
Well, I mean, we said it enough. The Gnashing, some cool finger picked kind of electric guitar intro. There's like a pulse to it. The way it just kind of is like grooving in on the beginning. Also this like brooding like octave. I don't know if it's like an effect or if it's just the harmonies together, but there's like this kind of like, it's very catchy, but there's like this, just sounds like a big fucking octave. It's like right in your face. I don't know.
I did want to say that I really wish that Black Powder Orchard rolled into The Gnashing, and for no reason it fades out. And like you said it comes in and it comes out. Why does it fade out when it's all the same notes and chords that could roll right into The Gnashing? And The Gnashing has the same vibe as like, what's the last track on Red? Is it The Birthing maybe? Or no, it's Grad. It's Grad. I'm sorry. So Grad is like the swelly, like the sun is rising kind of song on Red. And Black Powder Orchard does that, where it's like, okay, I feel like, we're getting somewhere. And then it fades out and we play The Gnashing. I'm like, just put them together. Just roll them. We're so big on transitions everywhere else on the record that I feel like, why did we do this? Right.
They made a point to literally like have all of these kind of like, all right, everything is connected. And then, it's just so quick. And then you fade out and then this starts. So that felt a little like, we're stopping. And then, all right, well, now we're back into it again. Yeah. So interesting. I like both songs, but it was kind of odd that decision to not like maybe put them together in that way. Dylan, you mentioned Ozzy Osbourne a little bit. I think there's like certainly kind of like a riff or like a rhythmic quality to this song that kind of reminds me of that era, like the maybe earlier solo stuff. But thoughts on The Gnashing?
I mean, it's a great track. I love the title of the track. Again, I do not know what these lyrics mean to that title. I think it's just a great song title. Gnashing of teeth comes to mind, different things. Again, it's just, I like records that end really well. That is such a important track for any record. It should be the first track, and the ending track should be, really big tracks, I think. And the way this is actually the last kind of full-fledged track on the record, because is it Bullhead's Lament? Arkansas, get over it. Bullhead's Lament. It's it kind of fades out the way the album begins, right? It's got the motif that comes back. There's a little bit more layers to it. There's a little bit more to the track itself, but it's essentially the same motif, and it just fades out the way it comes in. It's almost like, you go out on a lake to go fishing at the beginning of the morning as the sun's coming up, sun's going down, you take the boat back in.
There's like some maybe crazier effects on like the swirling kind of soundscapes and such. One thing, as we've noted with a lot of the lead lines on this album, is just the importance of like a hummable kind of guitar solo. Like you can certainly just run scales and do whatever, but it's clear that there was like a thought to like, all right, here's all the notes that are going to be played. And I think especially in this part, as we kind of end the album, some of the guitar work on here, I'm like, man, I'm like humming it. I'm just so like stuck on some of these melody lines for sure. But yeah, really just kind of nice bow to the end, return to the theme, all that.
Yeah, and I think I'm not really an outro guy either, but I think on this, because of the intro, you just got to package it up, like you said, because the gnashing could end the record. The way it ends is like it slows down, and there's this nice meandering guitar. That would be a completely fine ending, but I think because we've like hammered this theme for 10 songs or however many it is, that wrapping it up with lament, it makes perfect sense, and I'm not mad about it. It does feel like we've left shore and now we're coming back, and it's like, okay, we can like cool down on this like final last moment as the sun is setting on this record.
There were some like bonus stuff. I like checked it out a little bit. There's like a deluxe version of the record that has like a live performance from Roadburn in 2009. They also have like
the live Roadburn songs are Baroness at their best.
Yeah.
So I believe it's all songs from Red.
Yep.
I could be wrong. Those are like when I reach for a band and I want to hear them, and like usually live is like the best interpretation. And I think those in particular are the best interpretation of this band. Is them live. They do stuff a little bit different than they do on record. It's not as curated. It's like, let's meander a little bit. Let's do stuff a little bit differently. That's like, if that's what I would recommend the most to anybody is listen to those live tracks off of Blue.
They are great live.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They really every time I have seen them live, I'm like, damn, I want to be in a band that's this fun to see live. Because I'm not fun to watch.
You said it.
when I'm just fucking staring in one direction.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a touring band for sure. I mean, after the release of this record, I mean, they were just on tour constantly. They did a US tour from like, November 8th, like just kind of going back, I wrote down like a bunch of dates, but they were on the road from like November, December 2009 on like a US tour that was like a rotating lineup of like Earthless, Gaza, Iron Age, Dark Castle, just to name a few. They had like a one-off show with Pig Destroyer, Iron Age, and Torque, and they were able to go to Australia for the first time in early 2010. They played the Soundwave Festival there, a few dates with ISIS as well. And let's see, ton of festivals as well. Coachella, they did they were on the U.S. Mastodon headlining tour in the spring.
That's where I saw
between the Buried.
time.
Really? No kidding.
Yeah.
So between the Buried and Me, Valiant Thor, Baroness.
It was a stacked tour. I will say that was the first time I got to see Baroness. First time I saw Mastodon. It was in Memphis, Tennessee at the Minglewood Hall, which was a venue at the time. I'll say this: Valiant Thor open, great fun, kind of drinking punk rock style band. A lot of fun. I think Baroness played next, and like they just leveled the fucking room, because there is a, especially during this era of the band, there was almost a meticulous and like sharp edge approach that they had when they were playing live of like, we're just going to kill every single night. And there was a back and forth with everybody, and you could just feel the energy coming from the band. And I will say that after that, kind of like we talked about with Horse Called Golgotha, there has to be a lull in the set. And that lull was between the Buried Me, and I'll leave it there. And then Mastodon was like amazing. They played Crack the Sky in full, and then they played like a set of classics after that.
Damn.
Was that the tour that Brant got like a concussion at the VMAs or something, and then Baroness had to fill in on guitar?
So that was before Crack the Sky came out. That's when he got hit in the head with that friend of the guys from System of a Down.
Yeah.
That was before
I remember
Crack the Sky.
they were on tour with Baroness at the time, because there's videos of John and Pete swapping out, like playing individual Mastodon songs on certain things.
That's crazy.
Weird.
Brent could have absolutely ended up with another concussion somehow.
That's valid.
In the scheme of things. Absolutely could. Matter of fact, I've got a funny story that I've told Austin. I don't know if I've ever told Swindle, like 19 years old, seeing this band for the first time, or 20 maybe. And I just started getting the tattoo and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to show them. And I show Bill, Braun, Troy. They're just like, oh, that takes a lot of day. Just being really nice about it. Brent comes up. Show him, he goes, why the fuck would you do that to yourself? And I was like, that's all right, perfect.
That's what I wanted.
Paul, when was the first time you saw Baroness?
It would have been at that show that I sent you the picture of. So it would have been 2013. I've seen them many, many times since. I have the cover of their live record, the swan, the three-headed swan. I have that tattooed like on my whole side. So I went to some pop-up that John was doing one time. So there's a funny picture of me somewhere online that John took a selfie of him like next to like me like this so he could see the whole thing. It was very cool. The only interesting time that I saw Baroness was I saw them at Roadburn in 2017. So not the one that they did the recording of on Blue, but 2017 was the Roadburn that Baizley curated. So they try to have like a curating artist pick like bands that they want to play Roadburn or whatever. So Baroness headlined the second night, and they did like a career spanning set. So they played Tower Falls off of First. They played songs off of Red, and they just basically went like they did timeline their whole band basically. And that was the last show with Pete before he left the band.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, that was a really cool. Like I was looking up the set list yesterday, and I was like, I can't believe they played Tower Falls, and that's probably the last time they'll ever play that. Like they have no reason to. But they played they played I think The Birthing, which they don't play very often, and I think Setlist.fm was like the first time they played this since 2012 or 2000. You know what I mean? Like, so they were pulling stuff out for it, and it was awesome. Like they played the big room that night, and it was like I don't know how many people are there, but it's just a totally different vibe. The shows over there, people really care way too much, and it was really awesome to be like. At the time, they were probably my favorite band. So like I was on the barrier for the whole show and was just very stoked to be there.
I didn't see them till way later. So this is like the record before Stone was like Gray and Gold, or is that before Stone? So yeah, and it was great. Like I think Paul Bearer opened. Like I won tickets through. I had like never won. I think we were actually at a festival in Nashville to go see Thou. The first part of it was at a record store. I threw in my name just in like, oh, you could win tickets to whatever. Got a call. We're going. All right. So then we made a day of it. Got to see them, and I thought it was great. Swindle, when was the first time you saw Baroness?
That may have been the first time for me too.
Shit.
2019.
Damn. Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking more about it now, and I'm like, I've probably seen this band like 10 times, but I saw them on the Meshuggah tour, which I believe was their first. I could be wrong, but I believe that was their first full US back after the accident. It was either that one or it couldn't have been the one when I saw him in Rhode Island because he's not wearing a sling, but I believe it was with Meshuggah. And I specifically remember the show because they played second, I think, after Decapitated. So Baroness is playing between Decapitated and Meshuggah, which is weird as fuck. But like people were so stoked. Like people were being awesome to them as like a band that probably shouldn't have been on that tour. And I remember like they all climbed down off the stage and were like hugging the crowd after. Like they were so grateful to be there. And I like felt this want from them to play shows again after they had gone through the stuff and like finally come out on the other side of it. I remember leaving that show and being like, this band wants it more than any other band right now. That was really awesome.
Just going through a few more of these. I mean, they played basically like music festivals like all over the world this whole year. But the ones that really kind of stick out as far as like more, actual tours, they did a Deftones US headlining tour in August through September. And then of course, having gone to Australia in the beginning of the year, They actually were brought back to Australia at the tail end of 2010 for the run of dates in Australia for the World Magnetic Tour. So it was like Metallica, Lamb of God, and Baroness, which is like,
yeah.
what more
And
could you ask for?
they played whatever that first Metallica fest was. They did like a fest in New Jersey.
Oh shit! What was that called?
I mean, it failed because they never did. Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
right.
Baroness played the first one, and they were playing songs off of whatever record wasn't out yet at that. And I specifically remember that being a big deal and watching like fucking phone videos of it.
That's crazy. I totally forgot about that festival.
Yep. They did it for 2 years, I think. 2 or 3.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Reception for the album sold around 4,700 copies in the US in its first week. Debuted at number 117 on the Billboard 200 chart. Also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Heat Seekers chart. Decibel Magazine, for those who read it, they listed Blue Record at the top record of that year. So just to kind of give you a vibe. But, as we kind of round out the discussion on this record, however, we're many years away. We're many years removed from this record now, talking about it. Why is it important? Why did we spend like the better part of an hour talking about it? What do you feel like its legacy is? And, I'll give the floor to y'all.
I always suggest this record as a transition record to get people to like metal. I don't think it's really even a metal record, honestly. So kudos to like Decibel and all these outlets for being open to that, because I don't know if it's a weird time, but like, it's weirdo metal if it's metal. I don't know. I really don't. I think because of their contemporaries is why they got these kind of genre tags. And they're definitely the odd man out, but it's so listenable. Like nobody could you could put this on, a coworker probably wouldn't get mad.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very palatable, but it's still like heavy and still weird. It does all the things you want it to do. And like, I don't know, it feels good. It's a really feel good record.
This album moves. Everyone that's on the album is great. The guitar work is great. The bassist is great. The drummer is fun to listen to. He's good at drums. Yeah.
Austin, as a listener that is not as familiar with this album, what did you take away from it?
I think, it's, as Paul was saying, it's not quite, I think maybe metal adjacent, I guess, just again, being tied to certain scenes and coming up and on like certain tours and being around different bands. But yeah, I mean, like it is kind of crazy to me. Maybe we even talked about it with a little bit of like our Darkness episode, where it's like, man, it's so crazy that a band can like take all of these like classic influences and just completely make it its own fucking thing.
Put it into a blender.
Yeah, it is. I have never heard anything quite like it, but I feel like everything that came after it is like, definitely you could see where people are like, love this band, and like the guitar harmonies are great. The production's awesome. Kudos to this band, like, being just a hardworking, like touring band. They have their DIY roots as well, taking bands that like are, up and coming as well. Like some of these recent tours I saw, I mean, they got, Chat Pile coming out with them, some of the hardcore bands. I think they had like Soul Glow coming out with them. Yeah. So, even being this far into it and still having ties to like underground music and listening to it and actively being a participant in it. So I really can't say enough about this band as they're like how they navigate and operate, but also just the way they write fucking music is unreal.
Hearing this record for the first time and it just sticking into my gray matter the entire time, I interpreted it because it kind of felt like home. I'd moved to a new area. It felt like all of the music I heard as a kid growing up, and like hearing the stuff that I heard through my dad's music collection, and interpreting all that and putting that into, I grew up listening to Metallica records too. So it's like, oh, this thing's got a shitload of guitar harmonies on it. There's Thin Lizzy. There's all of these different things. I'm a huge Mastodon fan. Sounds a little bit in vain with that, but it doesn't sound just like them. It sounds like a completely different spin of whatever that Atlanta or Georgia thing was at the time. Again, I agree with Paul. After listening to this thing for 15 years, it's not a standard metal record, right? It's a metal adjacent would be the best thing, and maybe the only reason they get metal adjacent at that is the scene they were involved in or surrounded it, and the fact that they were on Relapse at that point, because Relapse is a metal record label. You wouldn't have had the albums after this record without this record at all. This was their breakout record. This was their breakthrough. Red, you get a new band essentially going out to the masses. They had releases before that. Red is a very fun record, a very great record. You kind of get a little bit more refined, as you said at the early part of this episode, Austin. And then it goes into kind of full on maybe what the band envisioned themselves as with the next record, which was Yellow and Green. And the hype around that album was so massive. That was before the wreck. That was after all the massive work on the road that they had done. They were arguably, between that record and when Purple came out, they were probably at their most highest profile at that point. I love this record. I can put this, the minute I hear something from this record, I want to listen to this record. Like, I have to listen to it. It's 45 minutes. That's nothing. I'll give time to that, to essentially what could play out almost like a classic rock record in a way. Like, you actually have an A side and a B side, and how everything sorts through it. I had a chance to see them a handful of weeks ago, and they had Portrayal of Guilt opening for them, which was pretty wild. I don't have much experience with that band, but just knowing enough about them to know, okay, Baroness is taking bands out they like. They pulled that band on tour with them, and they're playing small venues. Like, they played the Basement East, which is tiny venue in Nashville. And like, they were having the best time live, and the place was packed. The songs are great. The selection was a blending of the whole catalog. Although I do think they only played Isaac from Red Album, like they ended with that. But man, they killed it. They're still having fun live. It's kind of cool seeing John in like a Blood Incantation tee as he's playing though. But no, it's a great band. I may not listen to their newer records as much as I do this one. I will say I think Stone's, to me, was as good as this record was. I think Stone was the first time I'd heard the band in a long time and went, oh, this is what I remember. This is what I kind of internalized. Like, there are points on the records in between that I can definitely hear and 100% vouch and listen to, and tracks that I really like. I love the green theme over that whole record. I love the whole carrying the color scope throughout all those records was really cool. But something about this record just sticks with me more than maybe the others. And who knows what caused that? Who knows what's stuck in my gray matter? I mean, mental illness is fun. So there's no telling what it kicks in, but it may not be perfect, but it's definitely my favorite record from the band.
Just to add to that, I think if this band only had this record, they would still be one of my favorite bands. And so like, that says a lot about, I think, the quality of this one.
All right, we've reached that part of the episode where we like to share some of the things we've been listening to, things we've been checking out. We've kind of mentioned that maybe this isn't a metal record, so I'm not going to recommend any metal records this week. In fact, I'm just going to do some of my favorite country records because we're in the South. So Gilded Palace of Sin, the Flying Burrito Brothers from 1969. We also have Sweetheart of the Rodeo, the Byrds, kind of some connections there. Basically, like, the Byrds went down like a country path on that record. They had like Graham Parsons, who had I think was in another like different country rock band. Chris Hillman. Basically, those members of that band left and formed the Flying Burrito Brothers. It's some of my like favorite type of country of all time. I turn them on. It's just like my feel good records. Great songs, some Bob Dylan covers on there. So if you're looking for kind of a classic country rock vibe, listen to the Byrds, listen to the Flying Burrito Brothers, listen to Graham Parsons. It's some great shit.
I can't count the amount of times that you've put on fucking Flying Burrito Brothers when we've been hanging out.
Yep.
It's hard to subject everyone to some twang.
I'm gonna wreck the album Disentanglement by the band Fluoride. I just listened to that this week. Very fast, kind of like D beat, almost grind. Yeah, good stuff. Nasty, very gross.
I'm going to go really heavy on this one. I've been listening to the new Wormed record, Omegan. I hope that's how it's pronounced. This band has kind of had an overarching story with its last 3 releases that definitely delves into the world of, do you guys remember the show Reboot? Kind of goes in line with something like that. I'm fucking old. It's all right. It's a Toonami show that used to come on before Dragon Ball Z did. It was one of the first like CGI shows. It's terrible by today's standards, but it definitely delves into interplanetary beings and crossing into different dimensions and kind of Skynet-esque things, but they're from Madrid, Spain, which I got incorrect on one of the older episodes, so I do apologize. But man, this record is brutal. It's got slams to it. It's got a lot of tech shit to it. I can't wait to dig in further with a little bit more into this record, but I can't suggest it more.
I feel like the thing that comes to mind is like the obvious answer, which is the new Sumac record. But seeing them get to play those songs off it every night for a week, like it blew my mind. They're opening their set with like a 25-minute song. Yeah, who does that? Who can do that? You know what I mean? Like they're playing 4 songs a night, and 2 of them are over 20 minutes long, and the audience is just slack-jawed, captivated the whole time. It's getting to watch side stage and like watch Nick drum, like literally might be the best living drummer on this planet right now. And just see the way they interplay with like noise, and they're using feedback and just doing stuff that is not normal or not, it's not like structured, or it is structured, but it's not like, there's more interplay than I think most bands would do live. And so getting to see them do that every night and then listen to the record and see their live interpretation of that, it was very inspirational. So yeah, the new record, The Healer, that's my recommendation.
Hell yeah. I'm going to add one more. Check out Obsession Destruction by Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean. It's rad as hell. It's got a lot of stuff going on. So, I mean, I heard like some death metal influence, some hardcore, like it's heavy. It's fantastic. I know you have a show coming up that I definitely want to touch on. July 21st in Worcester, Mass. with Mizmor, Emerach, Prayer Position at Ralph's Diner. I bet that's going to be killer, man.
Yeah, it should be fun. We've played with Mizmor before. Ralph's is a fucking awesome place. So yeah, it'll be sick. We don't have a van, so I don't think I'm gonna be able to bring all my caps, but we'll see how it goes.
As far as, anything else that's going on, anything that people can look forward to in the future, what do you hope to accomplish in 2024?
What do I hope to accomplish? My goal for the rest of the year is to purchase a van. No, I mean, I could soft say that we have a record coming out this year for sure. Exact date is not confirmed, but in the next 3 months we'll have a record out. Other than that, probably going to be kind of quiet. We've got a couple of things planned and a couple of shows that haven't been announced yet, and hopefully hit some new spots next year is the goal, to push the new record and go from there.
Sick. Well, follow everything Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean has going on. You can follow us at Riff Worship Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have some playlists in the description below. But for Paul, for Swindle, for Dylan, for myself, you've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll see you next time. Bye.